This is Business Decoded Podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to the Business Decoded Podcast with Ronnie Spellman. I'm here with an incredible guest that I believe will offer so much insight and knowledge and wisdom to anyone in the business community, whether you're with a billion-dollar organization or a small startup organization. Kyle Bogucki. Kyle, welcome.
Ronnie, thank you so much. Really excited to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Now, you're the founder of Black Shepherd Strategies, and I've read about the organization and about your journey, and we've had a chance to speak. It's amazing, but let's start first. What is Black Shepherd Strategies? How did you get the name, first of all?
Well, it's named after my dog.
Okay.
My first dog. When I moved out down here after college, after my career, I always wanted another pet, and my dog Gaia I'd adopted, and she she's extremely loyal. She was a great pet, and I wanted to find a way to kind of keep her going, keep her memory going, and the fact that she was there as I was shaping my career and navigating the world of a young professional, and it's been great.
Yeah.
It's a great way to keep remembering going.
Are you familiar with Raising Cane's, the chicken restaurant?
No, I'm not.
No. So my understanding, I believe Raising Cane's is named for the owner's dog as well.
Oh, is it?
So
really?
yeah, and they're doing phenomenal. They're growing so much, but it's an incredible place. I didn't experience them until moving to Texas. But now they're across the entire country. So you have to make sure you go by. But there's that connection with the dog, right? And how much meaning.
The only thing I regret is the long email address.
Right.
It's not as distinct. It's descriptive, but it makes the email long. So that's I'm really proud of being able to keep her legacy as part of my brand, and it's been a great impact here in the city.
So tell us what the company does first, and then we'll kind of get into how you reach that point. But from a business perspective, so it's interesting. I know that there's a huge spectrum of work that you provide, from some design and creative work to even some political engagement work. So, but tell us what it is that you do.
Well, I take 18 years of experience here in DC and all my time in my agencies, and I bring those to clients of any shape and size. That's for larger clients. I'm an extra pair of hands. I work with teams and agencies here in DC where I cover maternity leaves, or I cover outages, and I'm just the extra guns that they pull in when they need some weight. For other firms, I'm the creative capability. They freelance and they outsource, and it's more cost effective for them to freelance their work. So I cover a vast majority of their creative design.
What size companies do you often work with? Because I've worked with a lot of small businesses, and when you say creative, they might not know what you're talking about.
Sure.
They might have cousin Vinny doing a lot of the marketing in their business operation.
I've got about 2 firms that are about 100 plus that I'm the extra pair of hands. I've got a couple firms that are about the 40 to 50 employee size where they don't have the creative in-house. And so I support them, and there are many sizes. Other companies are about 20 to 30 where I'm in more of an in-house capability where it's not an agency, but I could support their branding and all their deliverables. Even small companies, a candle company in Eastern Shore where a lady makes her candles out of her garage. No, I help with her emails and social. Or national security clients where they're 60 to 80 depending on contracts,
right?
And sometimes up and large. So clients of all sizes. Having pulled again the agency experience working for large telecom and large energy companies. I can talk to those higher execs of the top tier, or I can talk to someone that's trying to start something new and a new blog, and bring the same service.
And what's really neat about it, I don't know if you've been watching this evolution. I know we spoke about what's changing, not just in your creative space, but I think we're seeing this across the country. There are over 30 million businesses in the United States. The vast majority of those are small businesses. But that fractional piece, whether it's a fractional CFO, fractional HR, or fractional marketing executive, I think that is so helpful for small businesses. So they might not be able to afford someone full time, but then they can come to you and have all of this wealth of experience and knowledge, and you're positioned to help those smaller businesses succeed and better compete even with the larger companies.
That's right. That's right. Being able to provide the agency experience, the agency know how to navigate and even bring new ideas so that they can realize that there's more that they can do with whatever budget they're working on, and meeting them where they need to be.
Right.
And providing the solutions that work for them, for goals, but also economically.
Right.
People don't want to break a bank on a large website when, they're not ready, so it's about getting them where they need to be and providing a solution that's custom for them.
So to give some context, if a small company coming to you, what do you find their biggest need by the time they reach you? Like, what are they trying to perfect? Is it just, how do I get more foot traffic to my restaurant, or the person working out of their garage? What does she need, and how can you help a company with that?
Some of them is just really getting online. There's a lot of online tools like Squarespace and, some of those other web platforms. And even those, even when they're oversimplified, it can be daunting for clients a little bit. And being able to kind of hold their hand and enable them and empower them without taking control.
Right.
The biggest thing is that, and I've said this in other interviews, is that, the creative process can be daunting when someone's trying to start a new business. Right. It's, darn, I gotta think about this too, and I don't know what hosting or what an SSL certificate is, and understanding that and being able to say, I've got it. I'll explain what this is. I'll help you walk through how to register your website and how to get this up, and we'll get you there. But a lot of it's just getting online and being able to get some of that stuff set up so that they can understand what it is, but also use it, and without having to call me every time and be like, I don't know, what this is. So setting it up so that they just have the autonomy to keep going, and just and then getting out of the way, or continuing support.
So Squarespace is an incredible, I know GoDaddy and there are other different companies out there. Squarespace is amazing. Now, I don't know their relationship to Google. I know Google kind of spun out their work, and one of their preferred is that Squarespace. But what I find fascinating, not to get too technical on this, but how you can create an alias for an email off the URL, and it doesn't charge you on a per email basis. But they have some really great tools in Squarespace that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to be able to insert customization into there, right? So we can get a client up for a campaign website on Squarespace where they know they can use. But there's limitations, but we can still insert, custom, maps or custom functionality inside of that, where it takes it out of that Squarespace-esque view, right? Where you can kind of get an idea that it's a small business startup website. You can polish it, and you can add pieces where it makes it a little more valid, is a little more engaging, and you kind of breaks that template and mold a little bit better.
And Cal, I'm amazed with a lot of the smaller businesses. They think that getting a URL is going to cost them millions of dollars, right? They just reserve. And so ultimately they have, John's plumbing at gmail.com, which isn't necessarily bad, but they could easily have their URL, and it's, it's $14, $20, however much it is per year. Right.
Yeah.
And then you add the, some cost for the web development piece, but it's not as complicated and expensive as they think.
It's not. And breaking it down and letting them know what that actually looks like, kind of breaking that barrier and say, it's not more than that, right? It's not something crazy. We can get you online for $150 a year, whatever that is for basic. Well, not everybody's trying to, create the next Facebook. We don't need dedicated servers or, something, some warehouse out in Montana to house a website. It's, for a lot of it, it's just kind of getting them through that first hurdle of presence, existence. And then, let them, think about their growth or scalability, and just say, hey, if you want to do this, this can grow with you, right? You're not stuck in a dead end corner. We're not in a spot where you've got to redo something. You can just help keep going without thinking of everything as a hurdle.
So Cal, tell me about your journey. I hear that you grew up in a small town in Grand Rapids, Michigan. What was life like there in Michigan?
small, isolated, rather little conservative even. It just general in their ways. It was a very church heavy town, and Jenison, Michigan, and I got to play sports, and we had some really great classes that had some introductions to creative design. It was called computer creations. I was a freshman in high school in 1999 when I got to use the first versions of Illustrator and Photoshop. And dating even before then, I had gotten the Print Shop Pro program with the dot matrix printer. I don't know if you remember printing those big banners off of the dot matrix printers. I got that as a birthday gift, one year when I was maybe like 8. So there's always been some sort of inkling for design and creativity. So I from Michigan, I had the opportunity to play water polo for.
Well, I was going to ask, how did you get into water polo versus ice hockey?
Well, it's a lot cheaper to buy a Speedo than it is goalie gear. I played goalie for all my street hockey friends, and it's ice time was a lot more expensive than throwing me in a pool with a $20 suit and a $5 pair of goggles. So my family said swim.
Right.
But then as I got closer to high school, they started a water polo team, and I said, hey, this is a little more social. I was a distant swimmer, and there's a lot of time going back and forth in a pool, and a lot of time to your thoughts. But I liked being kind of the team aspect of the sport, and my older brother played, and that was sort of my drive to want to be. I was the younger brother, so I wanted to be better than him, and so I took that opportunity, that challenge, and through school, and became got my accolades and stuck with it. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I had the opportunity to get called up to play down in Erie, Pennsylvania.
So I'd like to talk about. So one interesting. I recently went to Minnesota, and I met a guy who spoke about his passion for ice fishing. Wow. And, not a lot of people are familiar with it in maybe the lower parts of the U.S., but it is. You drill a hole in ice and you go fishing, and you totally agree. You do.
You have to love it.
Yeah, but that part of the country, Michigan and Minnesota is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. I love growing up there. I'm from, the west side of the state, but born in Traverse City, and it's great. We love going to the lakes and spending, being out in the woods, and we learned sort of Boy Scout skills as well. We didn't spend all of our time in front of the computers, and we had a cabin that kind of up in the woods that you got to go haul water for. It's beautiful. I love it. My family's most of my family is still up there, and most of my friends are up there, and we did have a lot of hockey in our life. But again, there was more street hockey, and summertime, and I was the kid rolling all the pads around on my shoulder, and my baseball glove for a glove, and I never wore any helmets.
But there's so many great lessons. So I love hearing you talk about it. There's so many great lessons that you learn in those early years that really shape your career. A little bit of that competitiveness, a little of the desire to want to succeed and reach a certain goal through playing sports or any other activities. And it sounds like that helped propel you. You mentioned in one of our prior conversations that you've had a job since 13.
Yeah, I was always encouraged to work. I didn't come from a rich family per se. Both my parents worked their butts off, and always super proud of everything that they did for providing for our family. But knowing that there were decisions made financially, and that was a motivator to say, hey, I want to do things, and I can go get a job too. And so I mowed lawns. My mom used to haul me around to mow lawns all summer for, a couple of years. And then when I turned 15, my mom took me for a job interview at a restaurant. And I applied for a job, and was working, restaurants and service industry all through high school.
What were you doing in the restaurant, by the way? What specific tasks?
I worked there for a year before it shut down, and I was the busboy, I was the back line cook, and then I was the front line cook, and then basically everything but management side, drive through food prep management. I did everything in about 12 months, and then they ended up shutting down.
Now, Cal, that is hard work. I know that people go to restaurants and they, enjoy the food, but that the line cook, the serving, it is really hard work, isn't it?
At 15 years old, while you're trying to, have a swimming career in high school and education, and it was a lot. The Sunday mornings where it doesn't matter what you did Saturday night, you got to be at the restaurant, and because there's always the post church crowd coming in for their breakfast, and it was a lot, but it was fun, because it was productive, and it was new and challenging, and I worked with great people, and that's something, long part of the story is the people I've worked with, but it was hard, but you did it because you knew the rewards, right? You knew that you're going to get a paycheck and a little bit of independence.
Right. And this really explains. I want to come back to this later, not now. I want to talk about that progression to college, because I think this is important to your business story. But you mentioned previously the grind. Right. And I suspect that period of time taught you what that really meant, from having to get up early, I presume, for water polo practice. And then you go to school and you work hard, and then you go to work at the restaurant and you work hard, and then you start over again. And then somewhere in there, you have to fit your competitions in for water polo. But let's come back to the grind, because I think that really defines what you've built today in your business. But to go from high school, how did you end up getting that scholarship opportunity? How much work was it? And by the way, NIL is great today. It's really fascinating to see people in college being paid millions of dollars.
Man,
it changed the landscape.
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit andycostafilms.com/podcast and turn your content into leaks.
I don't know if water polo's got the market. So I was All-American water polo.
Oh, wow.
In my senior year of high school. And so the college, the coach down at Mercyhurst had basically, scoured the lists and said, who's willing to come down to Erie? And so he reached out and said, hey, you've had a great career. Why don't you come down? And there was only their second or their third year of existence at Mercyhurst. So he was the brand new coach trying to build something new from what was essentially a club. So he had a vision, and he wanted to bring top talent into the team. And he said, why don't you take a look? And I said, great. But they also had a really amazing graphic design program there, which was the bigger deal, right? Water polo was great. I played water polo anywhere. That would have been amazing. But I already knew that I wanted to go into design. I really knew that was a future that I wanted to sort of explore and create and see what happens. And they had both. And it wasn't too far from home, but far enough, right? It was about a 7-hour drive where I could have that little bit of independence and kind of see a little bit more of the world, or the country at least, and do it on my own and grind and make it work. That was the only option, right? It was that, or go back to Michigan and figure something out. So the grind was always the process. The goal was always success and succeeding and growing or making it to the next step.
Did you map that out somewhere? Like, how did you know at that early of a stage that the water polo was a means to an end? It got you to college, it helped with the cost, but your goal was to get into the creative space. How did you figure that out so early? Because I think a lot of people miss that. They're just going through the motions. They're going to high school because they're told to go to high school. They go to college because they're told that's what they want to do. And then they finish college. And then they have to go back and explore what it is they want to do and where they want to go. Yeah.
Ronnie, I would consider myself, and I do consider myself, a very blessed and lucky person. In high school, I did, some of those tech schools where, you go off class and you do more specialized focus. I was able to have that opportunity in high school, my junior and senior year, to go to a tech school where I focus on graphic design classes, not just the ones in the standard curriculum, but also where I learned how to run a one color printing press.
Okay.
And do, some of the overlays with masking and acetate and being able to shoot film. And at that point, there was we don't have exams in those schools. They have professionals come in and do evaluations. And there was one guy I had never met, and I had to run a printing press with a certain job and specs to it. And I did it in front of him with no issues and a lot of confidence. And he said, "You should do this.
Interesting.
Whatever it is, you should do this." And so I said, okay, that was the grain of sand that started the clock, and said, this is something I should do. And so that was a goal going into wherever I was going. I was going to, if I didn't go to Mercyhurst, I was actually going to go to a Washtenaw Community College over in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
So I could play water polo for Michigan, but still study graphic design at a community college. Like it was always going to be my path. It was what, as soon as someone said that, I hit the ground running and said, okay, I need to focus. Now, I wasn't always focused, right? I was a freshman in college, and, in some of those gen ag classes that you kind of get through, you don't really get, the design until sort of late into the end. But I had my first kind of break was my sophomore year of college. I sustained a sports injury. And so I was actually I couldn't finish out my sophomore year. But I had gotten an internship, my first internship from a classmate. Her mom was the CEO of a credit union in Erie,
right? And
I couldn't play. That's a lot of time back,
right?
And I was like, I had to do something, and I had an interview my second year and to do graphic design, be the graphic designer for this credit union.
How did you convince them, Kyle, that as a sophomore you were ready to help at a credit union?
I don't know. I'm really good at interviews. I think my extrovertedness, my overconfidence, but also too, by the time I was, I had taken so many classes in high school, even in freshman year of college, I had several years of experience working with these design programs, at that stage already. So I was already a jump ahead versus, trying to pick out colors or, the basic, learning the programs that some of my other classmates had. So I had some of that base knowledge. And I just had the I can do it attitude, make it fake it sort of thing. Like and I made it work. And I was there for out of that internship, I was there for 3.5 years.
Wow.
So up until graduation doing design work, but they also had me do member services. Sure. And I was also a teller for a little while. I was a mascot. I cleaned air conditioning units off the roof of some of the offices. I just did whatever I could to stay, relevant and employed with them. To because longevity, right? We don't see it a lot now, but my father was always a man of the longevity, and there's always the value in staying there as long as you could and create great relationships and great connections and. So really get to know.
This is the funny part of what you're saying. So my daughter's in college, and I've had this conversation with her. I'm not sure that people would say, Ronnie, don't say this on air. But I tell her that you have the job descriptions, and a lot of them have their requirements. You need to have been doing this work for 6 years, and you need to have this or that. And I tell her, ignore it, right? Go in and make your case. Yeah. And I think you have to have that confidence, because so many people self-select out, and you hear people say this all the time, and I'm sure it was the case in water polo. How many shots did you make in the goal and score points if you didn't take the shot? Right, well, none.
You got to take it. You got to take it. And also too, I go to your point with the job descriptions. I was, you kind of got to know your targets, right? You got to go into these things and say, what do I need to know for me to have this conversation with you?
Right. Do that research. Exactly.
And I scoured a lot of, Craigslist ads. That was, Craigslist and Monster were basically the two resources, right. Coming out of college. And you're like, what do I need to know? What do I know? But what gaps do I need to fill, or what do I need to understand to be able to have a conversation for a senior designer level position instead of entry level? What's that difference? And being able to to capture that and then to be able to go and have that conversation.
Right.
To understand it so that you can at least get in the door, because that's then you can bring your confidence to the conversation
Exactly.
and do the selling. So it's going to be sort of my end point here, but about putting yourself out there. It's the only way that you're going to get those opportunities.
Well, and I know we're nearing the end of this. I want you back on the show again because I want to dig more into your actual business. And this time, I know we've spoken more about your journey, your earlier journey, because I think this is so critical for senior business leaders today. I think for them to hear this, but also that younger generation that's now preparing to go through college and get out of college and find their career. I want you, though, to kind of end this segment talking about that transition from college to the workforce. So you left Erie, Pennsylvania, you ended up in Washington, D.C., which is where you still are today. But, and this gives me greater perspective, though what you just described in those years up to your sophomore year really tells me more about how you did what you did to make that journey from college into the workforce. But you ended up going to Washington, D.C., and it was a lot of work getting there. You mentioned that you saw your friends getting jobs early that were often in the hotel and restaurant industry, and you thought, kind of this competitive thing, I need to have something as well, right?
That's right.
Walk us through that, and I'd love for you to tell the story about your negotiating a deal with a company in Fresno, California.
Sure. So, I have this entrepreneurial spirit, and I know that there's success is out there if you get it. I've always wanted to put myself in a position of finding that success. So, when I was in college, I'd scour Craigslist and try to find opportunities for jobs and ways to build my portfolio. And I got caught up with a political radio show out in Fresno, California. I mean, I found it on the listing and said, they need a logo.
Oh, really?
And I'm,
Funny.
junior or senior in college, and I've got scheduled a call with these people, obviously on the West Coast. I've got my whole team in a van driving down to Slippery Rock.
Polo team, not your company team.
Yeah, no, my water polo team. I've got a bunch of college guys,
Right.
A bunch of college rowdy, about 13 of us in a college van, driving down to Slippery Rock, and I had to shut them all up so that I could have my first client call with somebody I'd never met about a logo that I was, diving into in a project. And, I only got $75 out of that whole deal, which is fine. But, the experience alone was, it was exciting. It was exciting because it was a reality. And, at the same time, I saw the faces on my teammates. They're like, wow, this is ridiculous. But at the same time, this guy's having a client call in the back of the van. He's making his destiny, right? This is what I'm striving to do. And so, I took that practice and kind of, put myself out there, and I got connected with people here down in DC. And I was seeing friends, have jobs lined up, and I was like, wow, that's great. Like that's security, that's opportunity right after you graduation. That's, a plan already made. That sounds great.
Right.
No one else works like that. That's what I found out. No, unless you're in the government, maybe like someone's waiting for you. No one's waiting for you to come get, hired on. So I was applying for jobs months before I was graduating, and I was having second and third interviews with teams, only for them to say, what's this March thing on your resume? I was like, oh, I'm not graduated yet. I still have a couple months. And they're like, we need someone now.
Right.
So, well, I got to graduate. So, but I was making my connections. I was making my presence down here, finding people
and building a portfolio. Even though it was only $75, you're still building your portfolio.
Yeah, on top of all my internships and everything else. I was building everything. Right. It was kind of the start of what this is now. Is just part of that drive. So I ended up coming down here the Friday before my finals, and having a 2-hour interview and skipping all my finals reviews and telling all my teachers that, hey, I've got to go do this. And then on the drive back, they called me, and I got the job. And got the job,
Nice.
and it was a much more calmer drive back up to Erie.
Right.
and then, I told all my teachers that, that I'd landed the gig and, I had something. So I didn't have to take any of my finals.
Right.
I finished school on a Wednesday, and I was down here working for my first agency on that Monday. And that was cutting it close. Yeah. That was about as close as I wanted to cut it. Cause I was, if I didn't get a job, then, I would have had to move back to Michigan and kind of had to, regroup there. And, DC was always great. And it was kind of wasn't my goal market. I wanted to use DC as a leverage up to New York.
Oh, interesting.
With creative design, but New York is big and expensive and a little scary. Right. But DC was just small enough, but in the right direction. And after kind of being in here in the public affairs space, I've said this is where I belong. This is where I'm most effective. So I never made it up to New York per se. I work with clients up there and that sort of stuff. But I feel like I've landed, where I was meant to be.
And so, Kyle, was that trip from Erie in college to Washington, D.C., was that your first trip to Washington?
Yes and no. I played polo against Naval Academy several times, and we've been through here. And we did a high school trip, and for like a week. When you're seniors, you do like a spring break trip or something like that. So not necessarily my first time. First time in an adult capacity, right? I guess in the perspective of this is work. This is real life. It's not the memorials and the museums,
right? Exactly.
Touristy stuff. There's life and business here, and there's certainly a hum to being down here in downtown.
Yeah, and I ask because going to a new place, almost sight unseen, even if you say it like you mentioned, you've been there on a vacation or been there for a competition, there's a difference in going for the first time and you're thinking, oh my gosh, even Washington, D.C. feels like the biggest city in the world when you're just getting started.
Yeah. Well, anything, you get off a metro and you're so disoriented. You're like, which way am I supposed to go? Learning the streets and learning the ways. I had, stepping back a little bit, it's sort of in my spirit. I did a study abroad when I was in college, over to Prague. Okay. I'd never been to Prague. I spent 6 months there, navigating and you kind of get immersing into the city. I played water polo for a club over there while I was there, and I was learning with Czech and Croatians and people from all over the world. So coming to DC kind of wasn't my first round of a new city, right? You get that survivor mentality of hey, I have to make this work, right? Where are my resources? Where are my connections? And where do I start? Where do I create my foundation? So it was a lot. It was a lot. It was safer because everybody spoke English, and I could I didn't need to drive everywhere, and it was rather it is pretty small and pretty compact. You can kind of walk the city in a day, sort of thing. So, but it was exciting. It was more exciting than it was scary. It was I had a job that was
key.
That was it. Right. Everything else was up to me after that.
Kyle, this has been a delightful conversation, and I am hopeful that as people listen to this discussion on the Business to Go to podcast, that they're getting a sense for what it takes, that grind that it takes to build anything, whether it's a career in polo or working at 13 and balancing all of what life has to offer, or making it to Washington, D.C. as your first job, which is a really big move as a first gig. I hope they're getting something from this. We have to have you back on the program just to talk more about Black Shepherd Strategies and what it is the business does and how you continue to help organizations. So I appreciate you joining us on the Business Decoded podcast.
Well, thanks so much, Ryan. It's been really great chatting with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.